My name is Paige Myers, and I was 31 years old the night I stood behind an intercom in a stranger's vestibule and listened to my mother beg through a pane of glass. 6 days earlier, half a world away, I had been standing in a clinic hallway in Amman, Jordan, holding a phone that showed me a photograph of a construction dumpster sitting in my own driveway. My neighbor took that picture. He wanted to know if I'd hired the men painting my porch. I hadn't hired anybody. I hadn't been in that house since the first week of June, and my parents knew that better than anyone, because I'd left them the emergency contact form and the fireproof box and a key I trusted them with. My brother was getting married in May. That is the whole reason any of this happened, and it took me a long time to say that sentence without my jaw going tight. What I said into that intercom put my mother's phone face down on the tile. But that wasn't the worst thing I did that spring. The worst thing came in June, in a courthouse hallway on Grant Street, and it cost me the house. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge. This is where we sit with the quiet ones, the people who kept every receipt, held every family together, and finally decided to stop paying. Drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe. I took the Amman contract because a recruiter called me on a Tuesday, and I said yes on a Thursday. 9 months at a refugee health clinic in the eastern part of the city, 6 days a week, mostly wound care and diabetes and old women who had walked further than I will ever drive. I am a hospice nurse by trade. I am good at the part of the job where somebody has to stay calm while a family comes apart in a small room, and I had been doing that for 10 years, and I wanted to do it somewhere that had nothing to do with Brentwood, Pennsylvania. Before I left, I did the things you do. I paid the taxes ahead. I forwarded the mail. I paid Wes Duffy across the street $75 a month to cut the grass, shovel the walk, and put eyes on the place every week. And Wes is 69 and takes that kind of job seriously. I did not rent the house out because my grandmother's chair was still next to the stove, and I hadn't been able to move it. That was 412 Delmar Street. A brick bungalow from 1948, 1,200 square feet, a kitchen with 4 pencil marks on the doorframe. My grandmother Lorraine died in that kitchen in 2023, in the recliner, with the radio on. I bought the house at 27 with my own money and nobody else's, and I want that on the record before anything else. On the 24th of February, at 4:12 in the afternoon Jordan time, Wes sent me a photograph. A dumpster in the driveway. A man on a ladder painting my porch columns gray. Under it, one line. Did you hire these fellas? I stood in that hallway with a chart in my other hand and typed a message to my mother. She took 4 hours to answer, which is not like her. My mother, Rosalind Myers, answers a phone before it finishes the first ring. When it came, the message said, "We're having it looked after. You're welcome." Then, 20 minutes later, a voice memo, and I played it 3 times standing in the supply closet where the air conditioner worked. She sounded lovely. She always does. She talked about Trevor and Bryn and the venue, and how the florist wanted an answer about peonies, and she laughed at herself twice, and she said, "We miss your face," at the end the way she has said it my whole life. I want you to understand something about the shape of my family, because it matters. I had been sending $600 home every month I was gone, which was money I did not owe anybody. In 2023, I paid $4,300 toward my father's cardiac bills, because the alternative was watching him not go. Since I was 13, I have been the one who calls the insurance company, who fills out the forms, who sits in the hallway while the doctor finishes. Nobody in my family ever asked me to be that. I just was, and then it became load-bearing. So I did not scream. I typed a polite question. I asked for the name of the contractor. Then I asked again the next morning. Then I asked a third time, with the address spelled out. Because I am the kind of person who thinks a clearer question gets a clearer answer. 2 days of nothing. On the third day, my Aunt Faye texted me at 4 in the morning Jordan time, which meant she'd been sitting up in Pittsburgh working herself into it. "Honey," it said. "Did you know about the house money?" I called her from the roof of the clinic where the signal was better. Faye Dolan is 66, my mother's older sister, retired from the post office, and she cannot hold a secret past the second question because holding it makes her feel like an accomplice. She started backing up before I even asked. She said she'd assumed I'd been part of the conversation. She said everybody had assumed that. Then, because I stayed quiet, she filled the silence the way people do, and out it came in pieces. The wedding was booked at the Heartwood Room for the 16th of May. 190 guests, a band, not a DJ. $41,000, and the deposit was already non-refundable. Trevor and Bryn had closed on a duplex in Carrick in the first week of February, and my mother had cried at the walk-through. I asked Faye where the money came from. There was a pause on that roof long enough that I could hear a car alarm 4 streets over. She said, "I thought you knew." I said, "Faye, where did the money come from?" And she said, "Honey, I'm not doing this on the phone." I hung up and stood there for a while with the city going orange underneath me. Then I went downstairs and asked my supervisor if I could give up the last week of my contract. She said yes in about 4 seconds, which told me something about my face. The airline charged me $780 to move the ticket. I packed in 40 minutes. I had 14 hours in the air to decide what I was hoping I was wrong about, and the honest answer is that I already knew, and I spent those 14 hours building the case against my own knowing, one reasonable explanation at a time. The layover was in Frankfurt, 4 hours and 10 minutes, and I found a bank of chairs near a closed pretzel counter and bought the airport Wi-Fi with a card I hoped still worked. Allegheny County puts its real estate records online. Anybody can search them. You type a street address into a box and the county tells you, for free, who owns your life. I want to be clear that I did not need a lawyer or a private investigator or a friend on the inside. I needed 4 minutes and a bad connection. The record came up. Deed of record, instrument recorded January 26, 2026. Grantor, in capital letters, Paige E. Myers. Grantee, Deborah A. Lasky. Consideration, $268,000. I scrolled down to the image of the document itself, and there was my signature at the bottom of the page. It was a good one. It leaned a little further right than mine does, and the E in Myers closed up where mine stays open. But if you had shown it to me in a stack, I might not have caught it. Underneath, the notarial certificate. Personally appeared before me. Charlene R. Vance, Notary Public. Commission expires 2028. Acknowledged January 20th, 2026. I sat in that airport and did the arithmetic that would eventually end my family. On January 20th, 2026, I was 6,000 miles east of that kitchen table. I had a passport stamp for it. I had a clinic sign-in sheet with my initials on it in 3 places: morning, midday, and the close of shift, because we sign for the narcotics cabinet and nobody skips that. I had a bus pass and a text to Jenna about the rain. I was in Jordan. The gate agent called my route twice before I heard her. I landed at Pittsburgh International at 8:10 on the 1st of March. It is a 19-minute drive from that airport to Delmar Street if the parkway behaves, and I did not make it. I want to tell you it was strategy. Some of it was. Most of it was that I could not make myself pull up to a house with somebody else's curtains in the window. So I drove to Dormont instead, to Jenna Prokop's building on SB Avenue, 3rd floor, one of those 1920s brick walk-ups with a locked vestibule and an intercom panel by the mailboxes. Jenna is an ICU nurse and my oldest friend, and she had a spare room and no questions until I was sitting down. Then she had all of them. I showed her the deed on my phone. She read it twice and said, "Call the police. Right now. Tonight." And I said, "Not tonight." She looked at me like I'd said something in another language. Here is the thing about being the person in the family who handles it. You learn that the first version of any story is worthless. You learn to get the chart before you get loud. I wanted certified copies with a raised seal. I wanted the closing file. I wanted the name of the title agent and the name on the notary commission and the date of the acknowledgement printed on paper I could hand to somebody. So I sat at Jenna's kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote a list, and I numbered it, and I got to 4, and stopped. Item 4, I left blank. I knew what it was. I just wasn't ready to write it down where I could see it. They came at 11:40 that night. I know the time because Jenna's microwave clock is 4 minutes fast, and I have thought about that clock more than is reasonable. The buzzer in a building like that doesn't ring so much as it saws at you. Jenna sat up on the couch. I went to the panel in the hallway, and there is a little screen, black and white and grainy, that shows the vestibule. My father was standing near the mailboxes with both hands in his jacket pockets, looking at the floor tile like he was pricing it. My mother was at the glass. She wasn't knocking. She was hitting it with the flat of her hand, open-palmed, the way you'd wake somebody in a fire. Faye had told her where I was. Of course she had. My mother found the talk button and her voice came through that speaker warm first, the way it always starts. Paige, honey, come down. Then faster. We can explain all of it, it isn't what Faye made it sound like. Then flat. And this is the part I still hear. Come down here right now. It was for your brother. That house was sitting empty for 9 months and you were on the other side of the world. I stood there and let her finish. I have sat with a lot of people at the end of their lives, and the one thing I know is that you do not argue with somebody who is already talking to the version of you in their head. So I pressed the button, and I said one thing, low, the way you'd read a number off a chart. I was in Jordan. Then I let go of the button. There was a half-second of nothing. Then a hard sound came through the speaker, plastic hitting ceramic tile, and it kept going. A small skittering slide across the floor. On the screen, my father bent down and picked up her phone. I did not go down. Jenna asked me twice if I wanted her to, and I said no, and we stood at the front window in the dark like two kids and watched my parents come out onto SB Avenue. My mother stopped on the sidewalk and looked up at the third floor. She could not have seen me. She looked anyway, for maybe 10 seconds, with her chin up, and then my father put a hand on her back, and they walked to the truck. It was a new truck. I noticed that and filed it and did not let myself think about it yet. At 6 minutes past midnight, my brother texted me. Mom's on the floor crying. What did you do? Not what happened. Not are you okay? What did you do? I read it 3 times and put the phone face down. Then I sat on the end of Jenna's couch and I thought about the kitchen, which is the only part of this I have ever had trouble talking about. 1,200 square feet. A stove from 1994 that I never replaced because it worked. My grandmother's recliner shoved into the corner by the radiator, and 4 pencil marks on the doorframe going up from the baseboard, 1999 through 2002, my mother's handwriting on all 4. Lorraine died in that room on a Thursday in October with the radio going and my hand on her wrist, and I have washed those windows and I have paid that mortgage and I have shoveled that walk. That was the whole size of what I wanted. Not a settlement, not an apology. I wanted the kitchen back. At 8:40 the next morning, I was standing in line at the Recorder of Deeds on Grant Street with my passport in my coat pocket. The Allegheny County Recorder of Deeds is on Grant Street downtown, and the line at 8:40 in the morning is contractors and paralegals, and one woman in scrubs who had not slept on a plane so much as endured it. I ordered certified copies of everything recorded against 412 Delmar Street going back to 2022, $15 and change. The clerk slid them across in a folder and I sat on a bench in the corridor and read that deed the way I read a chart, line by line, top to bottom. The way you do when the thing you are looking for is going to be small. It was small. In the corner of the acknowledgement page, in 6-point type, was the name of the settlement agent, Keystone Abstract, Carnegie, Pennsylvania. I called them from that bench. Kurt Mellinger picked up on the second ring, 44 years old and cheerful about it, and stayed cheerful for about 90 seconds. It was a mail-away closing. That's the term. It happens constantly, and there is nothing illegal about it. The seller can't come to the table, so the deed is prepared, sent out, signed and notarized wherever the seller happens to be, and mailed back for recording. Nobody at that closing ever laid eyes on the person selling the house. The buyer sat in a conference room in Carnegie with a cashier's check and signed her half, and the seller's half came in a FedEx envelope from a kitchen table on Hilltop Avenue in Brentwood. I asked Mellinger to walk me through the file. His voice got careful, then thin. "Ma'am," he said, "everything in that file is in order." And he was right. That is the part that took me weeks to get my head around. Nothing malfunctioned. The system did exactly what it was built to do, at speed, with a forged page. Charlene Vance works the teller window at the credit union on Brownsville Road, 4 blocks from the church. She has sung alto next to my mother for 30 years, and she used to keep butterscotch candies in her purse for the kids in the second pew. I got in her line on purpose and waited through 2 people. When she looked up and registered my face, her hand stopped on the cash drawer and stayed, stopped. She said my name, like a question. I put the certified copy on the counter facing her, and I did not say anything at all, because I have learned that silence does more work than accusation. She looked at the notarial block, her own name, her own commission number. She said, "Your mother told me you'd already signed it and mailed it ahead." Then, faster, she said you were on a plane and there wasn't time and it was just a formality, Paige. It was just a stamp. There is a rule, and Charlene Vance has known it since 1994. The person signing has to be standing in front of you. Not on a plane. Not on the way. In front of you. She started telling me about her daughter then, which I understood. Sarah's in her last year at Carlo, she said. She'll be an RN in May. Like you. She was building a bridge out of the one thing she thought we had. I did not walk across it. I asked her one question, which was who put the pen on the paper. Charlene looked at the drawer, and then at the security camera in the corner, and then at me, and she said it very quietly. Ask your father whose hand it was. Faye's kitchen smells like coffee and pine sol, and it has smelled that way since I was 6. She poured me a cup I didn't ask for, and she did not sit down, which is how I knew. My father signed it. My father, Dale Myers, 61 years old, 31 years behind the counter at a plumbing supply on Brownsville Road, a man who has said maybe 400 words to me in the last decade, and meant most of them. He has beautiful handwriting. He wanted to be a draftsman before the plant closed, and he still writes his 7s with the bar through them. When I was in middle school, my mother handed him every permission slip and every field trip form, and he signed my name on all of them, because her handwriting was too loopy, and the school would have caught it. He signed my name for 6 years. He was good at it before he ever needed to be. Faye said he practiced on a legal pad at that table for 2 nights before Charlene came over. She said my mother sat across from him and told him which loops were wrong. That is the detail I could not put down for a long time. Not the money, not the wedding. The 2 of them at a kitchen table on a Tuesday, correcting each other on the shape of my name. Then Faye said something and stopped in the middle of it. Your mother signed something away once too, she said. 1991. And then she looked at the coffee pot like it had called her name, and she got up and refilled a cup that was already full, and she asked me if I'd eaten. And that was the end of that. Harriet Boyle has an office on the 9th floor of a building on 4th Avenue, charges $350 an hour, took a $2,500 retainer, and did not once tell me she was sorry. I have never been more grateful to a stranger. She read the deed for 6 minutes without speaking. Then she said, "This is a forgery, and a forged deed is void." Not voidable. Void, from the beginning, as if it never existed. It transferred nothing. It cannot transfer anything. It does not matter that the buyer paid full price in cash and had no idea. It does not matter that it's been recorded. A thief cannot pass title he never had, and neither can a forger, and in Pennsylvania time does not cure it the way it cures other claims, because there is nothing there to cure. She said we file a quiet title action in common pleas, and a Ellie's pendant so nobody can move it while we do. Then she turned the page over and started the other column, and that one was worse. $268,000 came in. After transfer tax and settlement costs, the sellers walked with about $255. $41,000 went to the Heartwood room and the band and the flowers. $88,000 paid off the mortgage on my parents' house on Hilltop Avenue, the one they've been in since 1992. $60,000 became a down payment on a duplex in Carrick with my brother's name on it. $22,000 cleared an old loan from my father's brother and the balance of the cardiac bills. $18,000 bought the truck I'd watched pull away from SB Avenue. What was left in the checking account on the 1st of March was $26,000. It was gone. Not hidden. Spent. Into concrete and catering and a driveway in Carrick in 5 weeks. Harriet capped her pen and asked me the question that ran the entire second half of my life. Did the buyer take an owner's title policy? I'm going to say the thing my lawyer said to me, because somebody watching needs it. Pull your county's deed record tonight. It takes 4 minutes, and it's free. If your name is still on it, good. If it isn't, you want to know now, not in March. Comment checked when you've done it, and subscribe, because the next part is where this stopped being about a house. I went to Hilltop Avenue on a Sunday because that is when they eat. My mother put out pot roast and potatoes and a dish towel over the rolls, and she did not act guilty for 1 second, and that is the thing people never believe when I tell them. She was not caught. She was explaining a decision. She said, "This family kept a roof over your head for 18 years and you have never once asked what that cost." She said, "Your brother is 26 and he needed a start and you had a house sitting empty for 9 months with the heat set at 55. She said it evenly, passing the dish, like a woman defending a household budget. My father sat at the end of the table with both hands in his lap and did not eat. I asked him directly. I said, "Dad, did you sign my name?" And he looked up for the first time and he said the only full sentence he said to me that spring, "I put my name to your name." That's all I did. Then he looked back down. My mother did not let the quiet last. She turned to Trevor, who was staring at the tablecloth, and she said, "Honey, you want more potatoes." And he took the bowl. He took the bowl. I stood up. My mother stayed sitting, and she said the thing she would say to me 3 times before this was over, in 3 different rooms. And she said it the first time almost gently, the way you'd correct a child on a fact. It was never really yours. I put my chair back under the table because I was raised too, and I left without touching the plate. And I sat in my car on Hilltop Avenue for 11 minutes before I could turn the key. I finally drove to Delmar Street on a Wednesday at 10 to 7, in that long blue light you get in March when the day can't decide. I parked across the street and 2 doors down, which is what people do when they are not ready to be seen. The porch columns were gray now. There were curtains in the front window, heavy ones, cream-colored, the kind you buy in a set. Somebody had put a bird feeder on the shepherd's hook where my grandmother's wind chime used to hang, and the shepherd's hook was still leaning slightly to the left because I never fixed it. I got out of the car. I stood on the sidewalk across from my own house, and I counted the windows. There are 7 you can see from the street. I counted them maybe 15 times. I was not crying. I was doing the thing I do at bedsides, where you find something with a number and you hold on to it. Then the storm door opened. A woman came out onto the porch, 64 years old, gray hair cut short, a cardigan and house shoes, and she was carrying a folding lawn chair. Green nylon aluminum frame, the kind that has lived in a garage since 1998. She came down the steps and across her own walk, and she snapped it open on the sidewalk and set it down facing the street. She said, "Honey, you've been standing there 20 minutes. I watched you the whole time. Sit down before you fall down." And then she went back up the steps and stood on the porch with her arms folded, waiting, the way you wait for somebody who is going to argue with you and lose. I sat down in the chair. Her name is Deborah Lasky. She drove a school bus for the Baldwin-Whitehall district for 41 years, Route 11 and then Route 4, and she can still tell you which stop had the dog. Her husband Gil died in September of a heart thing that took 9 days. The life insurance paid out $268,000, and she is not a woman who is ever going to put that in the market. So she bought a small brick house on a quiet street with cash, all of it, every dollar. And she moved in on the 20th of February with her sister's help and a rented van. She told me all this standing on her porch while I sat in her lawn chair, because she thought I was somebody's daughter come to see the old place. My lawyer had told me that morning, in writing, to have no contact with the buyer. There were sound reasons. Anything I said could be used, could be spun, could give the other side runway. I understood every one of them. I told her anyway. All of it. From Wes's photograph to the airport in Frankfurt to the notary block with Charlene Vance's name in it, sitting in a green lawn chair on a sidewalk in Brentwood while the streetlights came on. She did not interrupt. When I was done, she was quiet for a long moment, and then she asked me one question, which was whether I was sure. I said yes. Then I asked her mine. I asked if she'd taken an owner's title policy at closing. She said the man had offered it and it was $1,450 and there was no bank in the deal to make her do it. So she'd said no, because $1,450 is a furnace. She stood there working that through. Then she came down and folded the chair up with a snap, and she said, "Well, then one of us is going to lose this house twice." At 2 in the morning, I was sitting on Jenna's couch with a calculator app open, and I want to be honest about what I was calculating, because it is the whole diagnosis. I was not calculating what my parents owed. I was calculating what I could absorb. Per diem shifts on top of my regular schedule, 3 a month, maybe 4. What a cash-out refinance would look like if I got the house back and put a mortgage on a place I already owned outright. Whether I could carry $268,000 over 20 years if I never took a vacation and drove that Corolla until it died. I had a column going. I had numbers in it. Jenna came out for water at 10 after 2 and stood behind me and read the screen over my shoulder for about 8 seconds. Then she said, "What is that?" I said it was nothing. I was just looking at options. And she said, "Paige, you always take the shift nobody else will take. Every single time. Since school." And I said that wasn't what this was. And she said, "You're sitting here at 2 in the morning doing math to figure out how to pay for a crime that was committed against you." And I said something short and defensive that I am not going to repeat, and she went back to bed, and I sat there with that column glowing at me. Then I opened the laptop and started searching something I did not tell her about, and I did not tell Harriet Boyle about it either, and it would be 3 months before anybody found out what I had been reading at 2 o'clock in the morning. The duplex in Carrick has no carpet on the stairs yet, and every sound in it goes straight up. Trevor let me in and stood in his own living room like a man waiting on a diagnosis. I put the certified copy on the folding table they were using until the dining set came. He read it. I watched my brother's face do the thing faces do when the floor goes. He said, "He took a HELOC. That's what he told me." He said he pulled equity out of Hilltop, and it was fine because the house was almost paid off anyway. Trevor sat down on the second step from the bottom, which put him below me, and he stayed there. He is 26. He is a licensed electrician in his second year, and he works hard, and he is not a bad man. And I have gone over that spring 100 times, looking for the moment he became one, and there isn't one. There's just this. After about 4 minutes on that step, he looked up and said, "Paige, just wait. Wait till after May 16th. It's one day. Let her have the one day and then do whatever you have to do." He said they'd pay the $60,000 back. Eventually, once Bryn finished her certification, and he meant it when he said it, which somehow made it worse. Bryn was standing in the kitchen doorway the entire time with a dish towel in her hands, and she did not say a thing. I said, "You're asking me to hold it." And he said he wasn't. And I said, "Trevor, that's the family job. That's my job. Everybody in this house has always known whose job that is." Then I picked up my folder and I drove back to Dormont, and that was the last real conversation I had with my brother before the hearing. On the 11th of March, I went back to Grant Street with Harriet Boyle's paralegal and I filed 2 things. The first was a lis pendens, which is a notice that says, "This property is in litigation and nobody should touch it." The second was an affidavit of forgery. It is a 1-page form. You state what was recorded and when, and you swear that the signature on it is not yours. There is a box near the bottom, and the box is labeled, "Person or persons alleged to have executed the instrument." The paralegal handed me the pen and looked away, which was decent of her. I stood at that counter for a while. My father is 61 years old. He had a stent put in 2023 and I paid part of it. He signed my name on a permission slip in 2004 so I could go to Washington with the 8th grade. I wrote Dale R. Myers in the box in block capitals, because block capitals were the only way my hand would do it. The clerk took the form, checked the notarization, and put it under the stamp. It made a sound like a stapler. Then she slid the copy back across and said the most ordinary sentence anybody said to me that whole year. "Once it's stamped, ma'am, it's not yours anymore. It's the county's." A recorded affidavit of forgery goes automatically to the district attorney's economic crimes unit. Nobody told me that in advance, and nobody had to. I walked out onto Grant Street at 11:15 in the morning into full sun, and I stood at the corner for a minute understanding exactly what I had done, which was end something. At 3:20 that afternoon, my phone rang from a county number, and a man said his name was Detective Marty Sokol. Detective Marty Sokol is somewhere in his 50s, and he talks the way a man talks when he has done 4,000 of these. He was polite on the phone, and he was polite in the little room on the 4th floor 2 days later, and at no point did he raise his voice, or lean forward, or do any of the things people do on television. He explained what he needed. In a forgery case, the document is the crime scene, and to prove a hand, you need something to compare it to. Exemplars, he called them. Known writing, signed checks, letters, anything in my father's hand that predated the deed and that I could swear to. I sat in that room and went through my life in my head, and what I came up with was almost nothing, because my father does not write to people. He writes on invoices. Then I remembered the box in the trunk of my car, the one Jenna helped me carry up, and in it was a birthday card from 6 years ago. 25th birthday. He'd written 6 lines on the left-hand side, which for him was a speech. Even letters, 7 with a bar through it, the M in Myers, exactly the way it appeared on that deed. I took it out and I looked at it for a while in the parking garage, and then I brought it back up and handed it across the table, and Sokol slid it into a paper sleeve and wrote a number on it. That was the first thing this cost me that I could hold in my hand. He also told me something I did not expect. Charlene Vance had already reported herself to the Department of State. Nobody asked her to. She called them the day after I stood in her line. They pulled Charlene's commission in 9 days. In Pennsylvania, a notary has to carry a $10,000 surety bond, and that bond exists for exactly this, and $10,000 against $268,000 is not a remedy. It is a gesture. She lost the commission, and then she lost the teller job, because a credit union cannot keep somebody at a window with a notarial misconduct finding in a state database. Her daughter called me at 9 at night on the 26th of March. Sarah Vance, 22 years old, 6 weeks from her nursing boards, crying so hard at first that I had to ask her to start again. She said, "She's 54. She said, "Do you know what 54 is in this job market with that on her record?" She said her mother had been sitting in the recliner with the lights off for 4 days. I did not defend myself, and I did not apologize, because both would have been a lie. I said the only true thing I had, which was that her mother should not have stamped a page with nobody standing in front of her, and that I was sorry it was Sarah who had to carry it. Then I said good luck on her boards, and I meant it, and she hung up on me, which was fair. I sat in my car outside the laundromat on Potomac Avenue for 15 minutes without turning the engine on. That was the night I stopped being able to think of myself as the only person this was happening to. My mother is not a stupid woman, and she has been managing dining rooms and volunteer schedules and church committees for 22 years, and when she decided to fight, she did not fight me in court. She fought me at the level she is unbeaten at. On the 30th of March, she sent a group message to roughly 40 people. Cousins, the choir, 3 neighbors on Hilltop, 2 women from the prayer chain. I have read it more times than is good for me. It said that I had left my family to take a job overseas. It said I had come back and refused to sit down with them. It said I was suing my own father, who had a stent put in 3 years ago, and asked everyone to please keep him in their prayers. Every sentence in it was technically true, and the whole thing was a lie. And that is the most impressive piece of writing anybody in my family has ever produced. My phone did not stop for 2 days. A cousin uninvited me from Easter by telling me the house would be a little full this year. The pastor texted to say he only wanted to pray with me, no agenda, and I believe he meant it. I answered none of it. Not because I was above it, because 11 years of sitting with dying people teaches you that when somebody comes at you sideways, they are not looking for an answer. They are looking for somewhere to set down how frightened they are. Then, on the 2nd of April, Wes Duffy sent me his second photograph. My mother, standing on the porch at 412 Delmar Street, holding a bakery box, talking to Deborah Lasky through the storm door. I went back to Faye's kitchen on a Saturday and I asked her to finish the sentence she'd started in March. She did, and it took her an hour, and she cried twice, and I did not. Their father died in August of 1991. There was a house on Wagner Street in Carrick. No will. 3 children. My mother was 24. Faye was 32 and already married and out. And there was Vaughn, the youngest, the boy. Faye said the aunts sat my mother down in that kitchen and explained that a son carries the family name and a daughter marries into somebody else's, and that it would be simplest if Rosalind signed her share over to her brother so the house could stay whole. Faye said it took 11 minutes. My mother signed a quitclaim deed at 24 years old and got a floor lamp and a set of dishes and a ride home. Nobody asked her what she wanted. Nobody asked her afterward how it had gone. Faye said my mother told her about it 3 weeks later at this same table, and she said it the way you'd read off a weather report. Flat. Like a fact about the sky. Nobody ever asked me either, is what she said. Then Faye put her hand on my wrist and asked me not to take my mother's house because Rosalind has never had one and she is 58. I sat there, and I let all of that land, and here is what landed. It explained her. It did not return $268,000. And she had 35 years to break that rule instead of enforce it. And what she did with those 35 years was learn it by heart. If you're watching this and you're the one everybody calls when there's a problem, and never when there's money, listen to the next part carefully. It's the part where I stopped. Subscribe if you want to see what that actually costs, because nobody ever shows you the bill. Harriet Boyle drew it out for me on a legal pad in pencil, 2 columns, and she did not soften a line of it. Road 1. We go to the hearing on the 10th of June and we win, because we are going to win. The deed is void and always was. Title never left me, which means Deborah Lasky has never owned that house for a single day, and every dollar she spent bought her a piece of paper with nothing behind it. She has no owner's policy. Her only recourse is a civil suit against the 2 people who forged the deed, and those 2 people have $26,000 in a checking account and a house on Hilltop Avenue worth about $189,000. Harriet tapped that number twice with the pencil. And that house, she said, is free and clear right now for one reason. $88,000 of your money paid it off in February. Road 2. We withdraw. The deed is still void as a matter of law, but nobody has said so out loud. So my title sits in a fog forever, unsellable, uninsurable, and the family keeps what it took, and everybody at that church gets to be right. Then Harriet said one more thing, and it is the sentence the whole rest of this turns on. Restitution in a criminal case runs to the victim, not to the buyer. The victim of the forgery is me. Which means when a court orders my parents to pay $268,000, that judgment belongs to me, and it attaches to Hilltop Avenue. I asked her a question then that had nothing to do with either column. I asked what the mechanics would be, after a quiet title order, for an owner to convey the property to somebody else immediately, same day, by warranty deed. Harriet looked up over her glasses and did not answer for a second, and then she told me, and she did not ask why. My mother came to SB Avenue at noon on the 2nd of June with her hair done and a paper bag of banana bread, and she did not hit the glass this time. She stood on the sidewalk and waited for me to come down, which I did, because I wanted to hear it. She had an offer and she had clearly practiced it. Withdraw before the 10th. The family would pay it back over time, in a written agreement if I needed one, she said, as though that word cost her nothing. Come to the wedding on the 16th. Stand up next to Trevor where I belong. Let this be a hard year that we got through. She held out the bag. Then, because she cannot help herself, she went one sentence too far. She said, and Paige, understand what you'd be doing. If you put that woman out of that house, you'll be exactly what you're standing here saying I am. She let it sit. 64 years old, a widow, no bank behind her, out on the street because of you. That's the story, honey. That's the one people will tell. And I stood on that sidewalk and I understood, finally and completely, that she had thought about Deborah Lasky before she ever thought about me. That the bakery box on that porch 2 months earlier had not been an apology. It was a deposit on the version she planned to tell after she lost. She saw me get it. She didn't blink. She said, quietly, for the second time, "It was never really yours." I took the bag out of her hand because my hands wanted something to do. I never opened it. It sat on Jenna's counter for 8 days and she finally threw it out. The night of the 9th of June, I sat on the floor of Jenna's spare room with the whole thing spread out around me in a half circle. Certified copies, the affidavit, so-call's card, my passport with the entry stamp, which I had looked at so many times the page had started to feel soft, and I finally asked myself the question in the right order. Not what do I want? What have I been paying for? Since I was 13 years old, I had been carrying this family, and here's the part I could not get around at 11 o'clock at night on a hardwood floor. They never once asked me to. Not in 2007 when I did the insurance calls. Not in 2023 when I wrote the check for the stent. Not ever. I had offered. I offered at 13 and I never took the offer off the table. And they built a house on top of it and then they sold mine. That is not something a person does to you. That is something you let become the arrangement, and the only one who can end it is the one holding the pen. I called Harriet Boyle at 4 minutes past 11. She answered, because she bills by the hour and she is honest about it. I told her I needed one more document drafted and executed by 9 the next morning, and I told her which one, and I spelled out a name. There was a silence on that line about 3 seconds long. Then she said, "You understand what that costs you?" And I said, "I do." And she said, "All right. Be in my office at 8:40. And I put the phone down and slept about 2 hours. Courtroom 5 is on the 7th floor of the City-County building at 414 Grant Street, and it has a ceiling high enough to make everybody in it quieter than they meant to be. Oak benches, floor wax. You can hear the elevators through the wall. We were called for 9:30 on the 10th of June, and I got there at 9 because I have never once in my life been late to a thing that mattered. Deborah Lasky was already in the third row. She had a manila folder held against her chest with both hands, and she held it like that for the next 2 hours, and she never opened it once. She was named as a defendant in the action, and she had come an hour early anyway. My parents came in at 9:20 and sat in the 5th row. My father had a dress shirt buttoned to the collar and no tie, and he had lost weight. And he looked at the back of the bench in front of him. My mother sat straight with her purse in her lap. Trevor came in behind them wearing the tie he'd bought for his own wedding. Bryn sat down next to him and did not take his hand. Faye came in last and sat all the way in the back near the door, and Detective Sokol stood against the rear wall with his arms folded because he had another matter at 11. On the table in front of Harriet were 5 things. My passport, open to the page. A photocopy of the clinic sign-in sheet for the 20th of January with my initials in 3 places. A boarding pass, the recorded deed, and a birthday card in a paper sleeve. The clerk called the case, and I stood up. Harriet does not build to things. She asked me my name, my address history, when I bought the property and with what funds, and then she asked me where I was on the 20th of January of this year. I leaned toward the microphone and I said it the way you read a number off a chart, low and flat, because I had been saying it in my head since a closed pretzel counter in Frankfurt. I was in Jordan. Then the passport went up. Then the sign-in sheet, with the initials at the top of shift. Midday, and close. Because we sign for the narcotics cabinet and nobody in any country skips that. Then the acknowledgement page where a notary swore under seal that I had personally appeared before her in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, on a day I was 6,000 miles away, and the whole instrument came apart in about 4 minutes. It is a strange thing to watch a document die. Behind me, my mother's chair scraped the floor and she was on her feet. She said, "She's lying. She knew about it. She has always known everything in this family and she let it happen so she could do this." The judge asked her to sit down. She said something else, faster, with my name in it twice. The judge asked her a second time, and there was a tone in it, and a deputy came off the wall by 2 steps, and she sat. My father never lifted his head. I want to be clear that I did not turn around. Not once. I have been in a lot of rooms where somebody was losing control, and the only thing that helps is to be the quietest person in it. My voice never went above the level of a hallway conversation, and for the first time in 31 years, my mother's did. The judge took 10 minutes and came back and said it in 4 sentences. The deed dated the 20th of January 2026 was a forgery. A forged deed is void from its inception and conveys nothing. Title to 412 Delmar Street had never left Paige E. Myers at any moment. The recording was stricken. That was it. 4 years of payments and 9 months of Jordan and one photograph of a dumpster, and I won in the time it takes to boil water. Nobody in that room was surprised, and that is what I need you to understand about that morning. They had all known the truth since March. The only thing left to find out was what I was going to do with it. Out in the 7th-floor hallway there is a window at the end that looks down on Grant Street, with a granite sill wide enough to write on. Deborah Lasky was standing at it with her folder. She had not said a word to me since a sidewalk in March. Harriet came out and handed me a manila envelope with a single document in it, drafted at midnight and executed at 8:40 that morning. A general warranty deed conveying 412 Delmar Street, Brentwood, Pennsylvania, from Paige E. Myers to Deborah A. Lasky. I put it on the granite sill and signed it with a county pen, and my hand did not shake, and then I held it out to her. She would not take it. She said, "I can't take that from you." I said, "You're not taking it from me." Then I told her who was paying for it. The restitution order in the criminal case runs to the victim of the forgery, and the victim is me, and it is $268,000, and it attaches as a judgment lien to a house on Hilltop Avenue that is free and clear for exactly one reason. She looked at me. She said, "They paid it off with your house." I said, "They paid it off with my house." She took the deed with both hands, the way she'd been holding that folder, and she stood there and read her own name on it 3 times, and then she started to cry, standing up, with her back straight. Which is how women of that generation do it. I did not get the kitchen back. I have never once been sorry. My mother caught me at the elevators. She had her purse in both hands and her voice was under control again, and she looked at me the way you look at a stranger who has taken your seat. She said it for the 3rd time, in the 3rd room, and this time it came out with everything in it. "It was never really yours." And I said, "You're right. It never was. It was just the last thing I was still willing to pay for." She did not have anything after that. I have thought about that a great deal because I expected her to, and she didn't. Trevor came up on my other side with his jaw going. He said, "You just ended this family." And I said, "You ended it in January. I stopped paying for it in June." The elevator came and I got in it and neither of them followed me. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, I sat down in the same 4th-floor room with Detective Sokol, and I confirmed, in writing, that I would testify that the handwriting on that deed belonged to my father, and I initialed the sleeve with the birthday card in it. Then I went out to the garage, and in that stairwell, with my hand on the rail, I finally understood the arrangement I had been living inside since I was 13. Nobody ever handed me the job. I applied for it. I applied at 13 because being needed was the only proof of love I could verify, and I renewed it every year. And my family did what people do with a standing offer, which is take it. That is not a thing that was done to me. It was a thing I kept doing, right up until a granite windowsill on the 7th floor. Bryn Kendrick was leaning against the concrete post next to my car on the 3rd level of the garage, and I have no idea how she got there before I did. She is 27. She takes x-rays for a living, and she has a way of standing very still that I have only otherwise seen in good nurses. She did not say she was sorry, and she did not ask me how I was, and I have liked her ever since for both of those. She asked me one question. She said, "How old were you when it started?" I stood there with my keys in my hand and I did the arithmetic honestly for the first time in my life, back through the insurance calls and the pharmacy runs and the forms and the hallways, all the way down to a phone call I made to a hospital billing department while sitting on a set of basement stairs on Hilltop Avenue with a pen and my mother's checkbook. I said, 13. Bryn nodded once, slowly, like she was writing it down somewhere behind her eyes. She said, okay. Then she turned around and walked back toward the elevators to go find my brother. It was 3 weeks before I found out what she had done with that answer, and by then the wedding at the Heartwood Room had already been canceled and the deposit was already gone. My father pled guilty in September to forgery, which in Pennsylvania is a second-degree felony when the writing is a deed, and he got 11.5 to 23 months in the county jail and restitution of $268,000. He did not look at me in that courtroom either. My mother pled to conspiracy and theft by deception and got 5 years of probation and joint responsibility for the same number. Charlene Vance lost her commission permanently and the $10,000 bond paid out, and I signed every dollar of it over to Deborah Lasky, and Sarah Vance passed her boards in May and works nights at a hospital 11 miles from mine. The house on Hilltop Avenue sold at sheriff's sale in November for $171,000. After the costs and the tax liens, I received $154,000, which is $114,000 less than what was taken, and I will be collecting the rest of my life, or not at all. My mother moved into Faye's back bedroom. She still tells the story her way, and I am told she tells it well, and about half that choir still believes her, and I have made my peace with the fact that they always will. The wedding was canceled in the last week of June. Bryn told him she would marry him at the county office, or not at all, and they did it on a Friday in August with 11 people there, and she opened a checking account in her own name that same week and told me about it in a text message with no other words in it. Trevor started sending me $400 on the first of every month. Nobody asked him to, and I have never mentioned it. I write back the same thing every time, received, and that is the entire relationship, and it is more honest than the 31 years before it. I went back to hospice in July. I rent a one-bedroom over the laundromat on Potomac Avenue in Dormont for $925 a month, and the dryers make the floor warm in the winter, which I have decided to like. My grandmother's recliner is in a storage unit in Whitehall. I pay $62 a month for it, and I have not opened the door since I put it in there, and someday I will. Last month I drove down Delmar Street once, at 8 in the evening, slow, in that long light. The porch light was on at 4:12, the columns are still gray, and there on the porch, open, turned out toward the street where she can see who is coming, was a green folding lawn chair with an aluminum frame. Wes Duffy was at the end of his driveway with a hose in his hand, and he raised it at me, and I put my hand up out the window, and I kept going. My mother was right about one thing, and I have decided to let her keep it. That house was never really mine, because a house is only ever the place where you find out exactly what you are still willing to pay for, and I found out. That's my story. 9 months away. One line in somebody else's handwriting, and a green chair on a porch that isn't mine. If you have been carrying a family that never once asked what it cost you, pull your county's deed record tonight and put your own name somewhere. It cannot be moved. Do it today. Send this to the person who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.